few years ago, a group of us decided to hike up to the old abandoned zoo in Los Angeles at night. It had always been one of those local spots people talked about. An old ruin hidden in Griffith Park that had been shut down for decades. The idea was to scare ourselves, test our limits, get out of our comfort zones. There were 7 of us total, all guys, mostly friends from college or work, and we were trying to play tough. We weren't drunk or high, just wired on the excitement of doing something we weren't supposed to be doing. That made it feel more real, more risky, and more fun. We parked around the edge of the park, where you could still get a little privacy without catching the attention of cops or security. The sun had already gone down by the time we started the hike, so the only light we had came from a few flashlights and our phones. It was late, maybe around 11 or so. The plan was simple. Hike all the way up, hang out at the zoo ruins for a bit, try to scare each other, and head back down before sunrise. First, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that only happens far enough away from traffic and streetlights. You could hear your footsteps, the crunch of loose gravel, the wind in the dry leaves, and every now and then, the distant rustle of some small animal moving through the brush. Normal stuff. A couple of us joked about coyotes or mountain lions, but none of us really believed we'd see anything dangerous. It was still just Los Angeles. About halfway through the hike, things still felt normal. The path wound around the canyon wall, and the higher we climbed, the more the city lights disappeared behind the trees. It started to feel more isolated. The air got colder, not freezing, but definitely cooler than it had been at the bottom of the hill. Our breath started to fog up a little, and one of the guys pulled out a hoodie. There were points where we had to use our phone lights instead of flashlights, since a couple of the flashlights were already flickering or dimming. We thought the batteries were just old. They'd been sitting in a drawer for who knows how long. Around the 3/4 mark of the hike, the path narrowed a lot. It wasn't just a regular trail anymore. It became a tight walkway along the side of the canyon wall, barely wide enough for one person. We had to go single file, with our backs brushing against the cold rock and our shoulders scraping plants and branches on the other side. You couldn't really turn around easily, and once you were in it until the path widened again. That's when things got weird. Our flashlights started to flicker worse than before. All of them. Even the ones that had been working fine started to dim or blink. That was the first real moment that made me feel off, like something just wasn't right. Still, we kept moving, thinking it was just battery issues or interference from something up there. We turned on our phone lights, and that helped, but the mood had shifted. Everyone got quieter. Nobody was joking anymore. I was the 4th guy in line, close enough to see ahead but still tucked between 2 of the others. That part of the path was tight enough that we were walking sideways just to fit through. Our backs pressed against the canyon wall, and we had to shuffle our feet carefully. It felt like one wrong step could send you off the edge, and even though I knew the drop probably wasn't deadly, it was steep enough that I didn't want to find out. Then the guy in front, he just stopped, completely froze. It wasn't like he tripped or stumbled. It was more like something took the air out of his lungs. He didn't say anything, didn't turn, just stood there. The guy behind him bumped into him slightly, confused, and then we all stopped. I looked past the shoulders in front of me, trying to see what was going on, and then I saw it. A man. He was walking straight through the narrow passage, coming from the opposite direction. He was dressed in all white. White pants, white coat, white boots, and this old-fashioned white top hat. His hair was white too, and long, like powdered wigs in history books, except it looked real. Not like a costume, not fake. He had a scarf or cloth covering the lower half of his face, and he wasn't rushing or hurrying or even reacting to us. He just walked forward, like we weren't even there. What got me was how he moved. We were all squeezed against the canyon wall just to make space. There wasn't room for him to walk the way he did, straight, confident, without turning sideways, without slowing down. But he did, like the path was wide open for him. I couldn't understand how. It made no sense. As he passed, he didn't look at us. His eyes were hidden behind the brim of the hat, and his stride never changed. I remember holding my breath, heart pounding in my chest so hard I thought the guy in front of me would hear it. The air felt colder when he walked by. Not in a supernatural way, just like standing in the shade after being in the sun too long. Everything felt heavier. I wanted to believe he was just a hiker or some guy messing with us, but nothing about him felt normal. When he was gone, we stood there for a minute. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. It was like we were all waiting to see if he'd come back. But he didn't. He just kept walking behind us. And eventually, we couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. That's when someone finally started moving again. Slowly, quietly, we turned around and went back the way we came. None of us talked on the way down. We didn't even look at each other much. It wasn't like we were terrified and running. We just knew we weren't supposed to be up there anymore. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't fear in the loud, screaming kind of way. It was fear in your chest, in your bones. Like something had looked at you without looking at you, and that was enough. The hike back down took longer. Or maybe it just felt longer. The paths seemed darker, quieter. Even the small animals we'd seen earlier were gone. Felt like the whole park had gone still. Like everything around us was holding its breath. We kept checking behind us, expecting to see that man again, but we didn't. Nothing. When we finally reached the car, something else happened. There were these small orbs of light, maybe 5 or 6 of them, floating and circling the car. Fast. At first, I thought they were bugs or something, but they moved too fast, too smooth, like little sparks of electricity, but without sound. They zipped around the car, and the second we all looked at them, they disappeared. Just blinked out. That was the last straw for me. I didn't say anything, didn't ask questions, didn't try to explain it. I just got in the car. Everyone else did too. Nobody said a word until we were back on the main road. Even then, nobody tried to joke, nobody laughed it off. We just sat in silence, each of us dealing with it in our own way. I haven't been back since, and I don't think I ever will. It's not that I believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. I don't need to believe in anything. What happened up there didn't ask me to believe it. It just happened. Whether that man was real or not, whether those lights were tricks of the eye or something else, I don't care. Some places don't want to be visited. And sometimes when you go looking for fear, you find it. We went up there trying to prove we weren't scared of anything. But walking back to that car, I realized it's not about fear. It's about respect. For places. For things you don't understand. For the fact that not everything needs to be seen, touched, or explained. Some things are just there. And if you're lucky, you walk away. We did. And that's enough for me. I grew up in the woods, so I've always had a good sense for what feels normal out there and what doesn't. The forest has its moods. Sometimes you get the chatter of squirrels, the cry of jays, the steady hum of insects. Other times, it quiets down for a reason, usually a predator moving through. I can tell when the stillness means a mountain lion is near, or when it's just the heat of the day keeping things calm. But what I felt on that trip to El Dorado National Forest was different, and it's stuck with me ever since. We used to camp a lot out there, and one of our favorite spots was along Sopiago Springs. The place always felt secluded enough to be worth the effort, and the creek made it easy to clean up and find crawdads. One weekend, we decided to do a 3-day foraging camp. The idea was to live off what we could catch or shoot, only relying on the MREs we packed if things went bad. We brought rifles, some gear for shelter, and just enough supplies to keep us comfortable. The first night went smoothly. We set up camp along the bank, strung a tarp between some trees, and made a fire pit. The stream was cold and clear, and we pulled a good number of crawdads from under the rocks. My buddy managed to shoot a squirrel, so between that and the crawdads, we had more than enough for a decent dinner. The fire burned hot. We cracked open the few beers we brought, and the night passed without any trouble. I remember lying back on my sleeping bag, looking up through the branches at a strip of stars, and thinking it was about as peaceful as a camp could be. The next day felt off right from the start. I woke up to a silence that didn't feel natural. Normally in that area you'd hear the stream, the occasional bird, maybe a woodpecker in the distance. But it was dead quiet except for the faint gurgle of water. The air even felt heavy. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe I was just being overly cautious, but that sense of being watched kept digging at me. I've had a few strange experiences in that forest before, moments that made my skin crawl, so it wasn't the first time I'd felt something like this out there. We spent the day fishing, gathering, and trying to find anything edible. By late afternoon, we had some small stuff to cook, but nothing worth bragging about. My nerves never really settled. Every so often I'd stop what I was doing and scan the trees. It wasn't the same feeling you get with a bear or a mountain lion. Those feel sharp and directional, like you know exactly where the danger is. This felt more spread out, like eyes pressing in from different places at once. When night came, my friends decided to head a couple 100 yards up the stream to try for more crawdads. They took the only 2 flashlights with them. I stayed back at camp to tend the fire. As soon as they were gone, the unease doubled. The darkness pressed close around the campfire, and I felt pinned in by it. I kept the fire big, stacking logs and branches until the flames threw shadows up against the trees. I pulled my rifle close and sat near the fire, scanning the treeline. That's when I started hearing the voices. At first I thought maybe my friends had circled back around the opposite side of the stream, but the sound wasn't coming from where they'd gone. It was coming from the woods on the other side of camp. Faint, low, and muffled, like someone talking just out of earshot. I couldn't make out words, just a cadence. I froze, listening, every muscle in my body locked. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I leaned forward, eyes on the trees, and that's when I caught movement. About 50 yards out, just at the edge of the fire's glow, something shifted between the trunks. I raised the rifle and got it in the scope. It wasn't clear, too dark and too much shadow, but I could make out the shape. It was down on all fours, but the arms were too long. The way it held itself reminded me of an ape, but lower to the ground, thinner, stretched. I only saw it for a second before it moved back into the dark, quick and smooth, loping deeper into the woods. I sat there, heart pounding, scanning with the scope. After that, I didn't see it again, but I heard it. The faint rustling of leaves, the snap of a twig now and then, always just far enough to keep me guessing. The sounds would move around, shifting positions. One moment to my left, then behind me, then off to the right. Always circling, always just out of reach. My throat was dry, and every time I exhaled, it felt loud against the silence. Minutes dragged by like hours. I kept the fire roaring, feeding it constantly, staring out into the dark. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, maybe a bear moving weird, maybe a trick of the shadows, but the image of that long-limbed thing stayed in my head. The voices never fully stopped either. They'd fade out, then pick up again, faint and distant. When my friends came back, I nearly jumped out of my skin. They found me crouched by the fire, glassing the treeline with the rifle. I told them what I'd seen, my voice shaking, and they got quiet. They didn't brush it off or laugh. They just looked tense, then told me the reason they came back when they did was because they'd started hearing strange noises on their end too, rustling, faint sounds that didn't sit right. That second night, none of us slept. We built the fire high, bigger than before, and took turns watching the dark. Every small sound made us flinch. None of us admitted how scared we were, But you could see it in the way we gripped the rifles, the way we all faced outward. The hours crawled. I kept expecting to see that thing again, slipping just close enough to the light for me to catch a glimpse. It never showed itself, but the feeling of being stalked never went away. When the sun finally came up, the relief was overwhelming. We packed in record time. No one argued, no one suggested staying. We just broke down camp, stuffed everything into our packs, and got out of there as fast as we could. The whole hike back, I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something trailing us. We never went back to that spot again. After that trip, none of us even suggested it. There are plenty of places to camp in El Dorado, but that one was off the list. Whatever I saw that night wasn't an animal I could name, and the feeling it left in me hasn't faded. It wasn't just fear. It was the certainty that something out there had been hunting us, testing the edges of the firelight, waiting for a chance. And once you've felt that, you don't go back looking for it again. I solo backpacked into the Mogollon Rim country of Arizona in late September, chasing that crisp change in the air and the quiet you can only find far from people. This wasn't the desert most imagine when they hear Arizona. This was high elevation country, around 7,500 feet up, thick with pine, ferns, and undergrowth so tangled it made moving off-trail a fight. The trees were tall and close, their branches locked overhead. The ground was soft with needles and moss, and the air stayed damp from the recent monsoon rains. I didn't see another person after leaving the trailhead. No fresh prints. No voices. No hum of distant traffic. Just pure, deep silence. I hiked deeper than I probably should have, into country that didn't see much foot traffic. There were old game trails, long abandoned pot grow clearings with broken irrigation lines half buried under leaf litter, and the kind of eerie stillness that makes you glance over your shoulder more than usual. I knew what to watch for: signs of new grows, recent human activity, but there wasn't anything fresh, just the skeletons of past operations. That was a relief. Those guys don't like visitors. I eventually found a spot above a small creek. It was a flat bench of earth, just wide enough for my tent and a little space to move around. Maybe the size of a large living room. Behind me, a steep cliff covered in thick brush rose up like a wall. No way anyone could approach from that direction without me hearing them crashing through it. In front of me, the ground dropped off in a sudden undercut ledge, maybe 12 feet down to the creek. The floods from years past had carved it out, and you couldn't get up that way without a rope or wings. The only path in was a narrow game trail from the east, steep and winding, choked with branches. You'd have to knock down rocks and snap brush to get through. I set up camp, filtered water, ate, and messaged my family through my satellite device. It took longer than usual to send. The tree canopy above was so thick the signal barely made it out. But it finally went through and I settled in. That night was dead quiet. Not just normal camping quiet. No birds, no frogs, no bugs, no wind, just the faintest trickle of the creek below. It was a new moon and overcast. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. It was so dark that even the outline of my tent walls was hard to make out. And the silence. I've camped alone many times, but this was different. The kind of silence that presses in on you. The kind where your own breathing and heartbeat feel loud. I heard a mouse skitter in the undergrowth once, but that was it. No roostles. No calls. Just black and quiet. Somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up. I don't know why, there was no sound, no dream. I just came awake, fully alert, like my body had flipped a switch. And my tent was filled with a white light. Bright, almost pure white. Not blue like a headlamp or orange like a camp lantern. It was bright enough to make shadows of my gear against the tent walls. I could see the outlines of my backpack, my boots, even the seams in the fabric. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. I don't know, but I sat up, heart hammering, thinking someone had found me. Maybe a ranger, maybe something worse. I thought about those old pot grows and the kinds of people who might still check in on places like that. I reached for my flashlight and my knife and unzipped the tent fast, ready for whatever was out there. As soon as I unzipped, the light was gone. Gone. Just pure black again. The moment I opened that flap, no fading out, no footsteps, just like it had never been there. I stepped out with my flashlight on. It's a strong one, beam cuts through trees like a car headlight. I scanned the trail, the brush behind me, the drop-off to the creek. Nothing. No noise. No movement. No footprints on the soft dirt. Nothing broken. I shut the light off and stood there, trying to hear anything at all. Still nothing. Just the water below. That same slow trickle. Then, maybe 100 feet off through the trees, I caught something. A flicker. Not a flashlight beam. Not steady. Not like someone walking with a light. This was soft, dim, and irregular. Like a glow, almost like how light bounces off fog. It shimmered faintly behind some tree trunks, then faded. Came back again a bit to the right, lower, then vanished. It didn't light up the area around it. It wasn't casting shadows or reaching out like a beam would. It just flickered, like a firefly but white, and much bigger. I watched it for a long time, maybe 10 minutes. It would come and go, always in the same patch of woods off-trail, always moving slightly but never closer. No sound, no crunching leaves or broken twigs. On a night like that, with how quiet it was, even a step would have echoed like thunder. But there was nothing. Then it was gone. I stayed up the rest of the night, sitting outside the tent with my light in my lap, switching it on and off every so often. The forest stayed dead. No movement, no other light, no animals. Even after first light, I didn't hear a bird call. Not even the dawn songs you expect right as the sky starts to lighten. I know what that kind of silence means. Either a predator is near or something else has put the forest on edge. When the sun finally rose enough to see, I walked the area, the spot where the light had been. Nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No dister d'underbruix. I even looked for animal sign, nothing fresh. Just an old deer path with old scat and leaf litter. Whatever had happened, it hadn't left a trace. I packed up fast. Didn't eat. Didn't boil coffee. Just loaded my pack and headed down that game trail. Every step making noise in the stillness. Rocks shifting underfoot. Branches catching on my sleeves. It struck me then just how loud anyone would have been trying to climb up to my camp. It would have been impossible to miss, but I hadn't heard a thing. I made it out that day, several hours of bushwhacking and hard trail back to the car. When I finally got to a signal, I checked in with my family. I didn't mention the light. Not then. I've camped alone since. I still backpack solo, but I haven't gone back to that bench. I could find it again easily, map, coordinates, the trail all etched into my memory. But I won't. There was something wrong about that place. Not ghosts, not aliens, just a wrongness. Something about how the forest didn't breathe there. No life, no sound. Like even the trees didn't want to be there anymore. It wasn't just fear. It was the silence that stayed with me. The kind of silence you can't explain unless you've stood in it. Alive and alert, heart pounding, and still feeling like you're buried under something too big to see. I don't need to understand what it was. I just know I won't go back. I was a stupid kid, 13, maybe 14. Somewhere in that age where you think you know something about the world, but in truth, you don't know a damn thing. I was obsessed with the idea of hunting. Not because anyone in my family hunted, we didn't have guns in the house, we didn't go on trips to the woods. Nobody showed me how to track or clean an animal. I just got it in my head that it was something I wanted to do. Maybe it was from books, movies, or something I saw online. I don't know. What I do know is that the day I got my first BB gun, I felt like I was stepping into some rite of passage. It was a cheap pump action, scratched up from someone else's use, but it worked well enough to punch holes in cans and, in my dumb young mind, maybe take down something small. The woods near my house were thick and quiet, about a quarter mile from the back edge of our property. I'd been exploring those trees since I could walk. When I was real little, like 2 or 3, my dad used to point out this old, broken-down farmhouse that sat deeper in the woods, past the swamp. Back then, it still had a roof, walls, and the shadow of a porch. By the time I was old enough to go out there alone, it was nothing but a cracked stone foundation and a chimney leaning slightly sideways, half sunk in the mud and leaves. It always felt like a forgotten place, the kind of place where time just gave up trying to pass. That evening, I had the BB gun slung across my shoulder and a small backpack with a sandwich and a flashlight. I told my mom I was just going out to look for squirrels, though I wasn't even sure if that was legal. I didn't know anything about seasons, permits, or any of that. I just wanted to see if I could shoot something. Sounds cruel now, and it is. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a bored kid looking for a thrill. I remember how the light started to fade around me, that gray kind of dusk where everything turns the same color, and the woods feel like they're holding their breath. The trees were tall and thin, with leaves rustling just enough to make me feel like I wasn't alone. I made my way past the edge of the swamp, hopping over a few rotted boards that once acted like a path. That's when I saw the bird. It landed on the top of a dead pine tree, one of those that had long lost its needles and stood like a skeleton against the sky. I remember the sound its wings made as it came down, huge, slow, heavy, not like a regular bird. I looked up and saw its silhouette, broad shoulders, thick head, and long wings folded against its side. At the time, I figured it was some kind of owl, maybe a great horned owl or something even bigger. Looking back, I don't know what it was. Maybe I don't want to know, but I raised the BB gun and pumped it. I didn't think about what it was. I didn't even really aim. I just shot. I'll never forget the sound it made. It didn't fall right away. First it screamed, no, it shrieked. This awful, cracking, broken sound like metal grinding or a scream underwater. Then it dropped, not like something falling, but like something folding in on itself. It hit the ground somewhere out of sight, and in that instant, everything in the woods changed. The air got thicker, heavier. I stood frozen for a half second, listening, and then it began. All around me, from the trees, the swamp, the bushes, came these noises. Screeches, howls, and something else, like whooping sounds. Not from one direction, from every direction. High up in the trees and low to the ground. It was like the whole forest suddenly woke up and decided it hated me. It sounded like dozens, maybe 100 voices rising all at once. Not human voices, something else. Something wild and ancient. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. My legs just took over. I dropped the BB gun without even noticing. I sprinted back the way I came, slipping on leaves, hitting branches, cutting my arm open on a thorn. My heart was in my throat. The sounds didn't stop. If anything, they got louder. Every step I took, it was like something else screamed louder from behind. I was sure something was chasing me. I never looked back. I didn't want to see what it might be. I burst through the edge of the woods and didn't stop running until I hit the back door of my house. My mom yelled at me when I came in, muddy and bleeding and gasping for breath. But I don't think I said a word. I just went to my room and sat on my bed with the light on, shaking. I didn't sleep that night. I don't remember when I stopped shaking. I never went back to that part of the woods. Not even years later, when I got older and smarter and realized how reckless I had been. What gets me is that I didn't even think about that night for years. I honestly forgot it ever happened. It was buried somewhere in the back of my mind, and only recently did it come back, clear as day. I tried looking up owl sounds, distress calls, anything that might explain what I heard, but nothing matched. Owls don't make those kinds of sounds. Not alone, and definitely not all at once like that. I even checked other animals in the region, foxes, bobcats, raccoons. Some of them can scream, sure, but not like that. Not all around me, not from the trees. Now I'm a different person. I still love nature. I spend most of my free time hiking, camping, fishing, but I treat it with respect. I don't bring a gun into the woods unless it's for safety, and even then, I hesitate to use it. I've learned the difference between living in nature and disturbing it. There's a balance out there, something older and deeper than us. When you mess with it, it messes back. I think that's what happened that night. I broke something I shouldn't have. Not just the bird, but some invisible thread that held the place together. It wasn't magic, not in the fairy tale sense. It wasn't ghosts or demons or whatever people like to believe. It was just the woods responding in the only way they could. With sound, with fear, with power. I still don't know what that bird was. I never found its body. Maybe it got up and flew away. Maybe it didn't. But I know I wasn't supposed to shoot it. I felt it in my bones the second I pulled the trigger. I feel it now just thinking about it. And maybe that's the point. That weight, that memory, that's what stays with you. That's what teaches you not to make the same mistake twice. These days, I live in a small apartment, far from the woods. And strangely enough, it's here, not out there, that I deal with weird stuff. Every other night, it seems like something knocks on the walls, or the lights flicker, or I hear steps in the hallway when no one's there. Could be bad wiring, could be thin walls, could be stress. I don't care anymore. Nothing compares to that night in the woods. That night taught me something I should have learned from the beginning. You don't go into the wild thinking you own it. You're a guest. And if you forget that, even for a moment, the woods will remind you. They reminded me. It was about 12:30 at night, and we were deep in the Ocala National Forest, Florida. My buddy and I had been out there all day trying to track hogs. We came in before sunrise and had planned to hike out before nightfall, but we got so caught up in the hunt that we didn't realize how far we had gone. The forest is massive, and it's easy to lose track of the trails once you're off the main ones. When we finally decided to head back, we figured we were about 3 or 4 miles in from the nearest paved road. The woods out there are thick, swampy in places. Pines, oaks, palmettos, underbrush that tangles at your legs. Still, the moon was bright that night, almost full, and the sky was clear. It was cold enough to keep the bugs down, but not too cold to slow us down. We had gear, plenty of it. I had my AR-15 slung over my chest, a Glock on my hip, and a fixed blade knife in a sheath just above my knee. My buddy had about the same. We both had mounted lights on our rifles, and I carried a big flashlight in my hand that could switch to strobe or blind someone if needed. The thing was heavy too, like a baton. We weren't worried. Not about animals, not about people. We were in good shape, well prepared, and had walked trails like this before. The kind we were on was an old logging road. Overgrown, narrow, but still walkable. These roads cut through the forest in grid-like patterns, making big squares of land that all looked the same if you didn't know what you were doing. We were halfway through one of these quadrants, maybe a mile from the next main trail, when we started hearing something moving through the woods to our right. It was loud, fast, crashing through the underbrush. Definitely not a squirrel or raccoon. Too big. It was moving toward the trail like it was going to cross in front of us. I thought maybe a deer at first, or maybe even a bear. But bears don't usually run like that unless they're spooked. We stopped. Didn't turn on the rifle lights because we weren't trying to waste battery, and we knew we couldn't shoot anything at night anyway. So I raised my flashlight and waited. As soon as it got close to the trail, I hit the switch. The beam lit up the trail and just beyond it. All I saw was a pair of pale legs, white, thin, bare, run across the trail about 50 feet in front of us. They looked human. That's it. Just legs. No sound but the crashing. No shirt, no shoes, no light. Just the legs, from the knees down, disappearing into the brush on the other side of the trail. We both stood there for a second, confused. I swung the light around, scanned the woods, but it was too thick to see more than a few feet in. Then it went quiet, like whatever it was had stopped moving or was waiting. It didn't make sense. What kind of idiot runs through thick woods in the middle of the night with no light? You'd trip in seconds. And who wears shorts out here, where everything has thorns or bites? The trails might be manageable, but off-trail, you're getting cut up bad. Still, we weren't scared, just weirded out. We talked about turning back and going around the quadrant, but it would have added half an hour or more, and we were already tired. So we kept going, slower now, more alert. We had our rifles up, lights off, ears open. Every now and then, we'd hear movement in the brush, but it was always off to the side, never close again. Almost like something was shadowing us, staying just out of sight. Eventually, we got back to the car. I was half expecting it to be broken into, but it was fine, untouched. We loaded the rifles into the back seat, stashed the handguns between the seats, and got in. I turned the engine over and let out a breath. My shirt was soaked with sweat, even though the night was cool. We started driving out. The road was narrow, dirt, and rutted from rain. My headlights lit up the trees on either side, but otherwise it was black as pitch. Stars overhead were bright through the open moonroof. No city lights out there to drown them out. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked. You forget how quiet the woods can be until you stop moving. Then, maybe half a mile from the car, we saw him. A man walking down the middle of the road. Just walking. My headlights caught him about 60 yards ahead. He had on a checkered button-down shirt, shorts, and sneakers. No pack, no water bottle, no flashlight. Nothing in his hands. Just walking with his arms loose at his sides, like he was out for a stroll. His shirt was hanging loose and looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. His skin looked pale, like the legs we saw earlier. I slowed the car but didn't stop. As we passed, he didn't even glance at us, just kept walking straight ahead, down the road into the dark. We looked back, and he didn't turn or stop, just kept walking. Now here's the part that stuck with me. There's nothing out there.
No cabins. No campsites.
No houses. It's one of the more remote sections of the forest. The only thing out that way is old logging roads, brush, and swamp. To get to where we were, you'd have to hike several miles on foot or have a four-wheel drive. There's no way he wandered out from a nearby home. We were miles from pavement, and another 10 miles past that to the closest town. No lights, no trails, no reason for anyone to be out there without gear. We didn't stop to ask questions, just drove on. When we got close to the paved road, we pulled over, unloaded the rifles, locked them in the trunk, and drove home. Neither of us said much. We were both thinking the same thing but didn't want to say it out loud. We never saw a face, never heard a voice, just the crashing in the woods, the legs, and the man on the road. I still go back to Ocala. I like it out there. The air is clean, the night skies are beautiful, and the hunting is good. But I never go back unarmed, and I never go back unprepared. Something about that night still doesn't sit right with me. I've tried to explain it away. Maybe a lost hiker, maybe a squatter, maybe someone just not right in the head, but nothing really adds up. The way he moved, the way he appeared from nowhere, the silence. People think the wild is empty, that if you're out there and don't see anything, nothing is around. But the woods have layers. Sounds move differently. Light plays tricks. You can be 30 feet from someone and never know it. And sometimes you're not as alone as you think you are. That trip reminded me that just because you're armed doesn't mean you're safe. Sometimes the things that are truly dangerous don't announce themselves. They just watch and wait. My buddy and I had been planning the trip since the beginning of senior year. We knew we wanted to do something big after graduation, something that would be more than just a party or a trip to the beach. We wanted something we'd remember for the rest of our lives. Hiking the Grand Canyon seemed perfect. It was huge, wild, dangerous, everything we thought we were ready for. We were both 18, in shape, and full of that dumb kind of confidence that only comes when you haven't been knocked around by life yet. We found the Tanner Trail while researching online. All the trail reviews said it was hard, steep, unmaintained, exposed, but we saw that as a challenge. The harder the better, we thought. We didn't want the paved viewpoints or the bus tours. We wanted the raw version, and Tanner was definitely that. We packed light, probably too light. We had enough water to get us down, but didn't really understand how dangerous the heat would be. It was late June. Temps at the top were in the 90s, but at the bottom, near the river, they were pushing 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The hike started out beautiful. At the top, the views went on forever. You could see the layers of red and orange rock stretching in every direction. But the deeper we went, the more the heat pressed down. There's no shade on that trail, just switchback after switchback with nothing but rock and sand. The drop felt endless. My legs were shaking halfway down, and I was already sweating through my clothes before we even made it halfway. We passed old rock falls and broken cairns, and at some points the trail felt more like a memory than a path. But we didn't see another person, not one. The silence was total. The kind you only get in places far from anything. No roads, no birds, no wind. Just heat and rock and the crunch of your own footsteps. Took most of the day to get down. By the time we were in the bottom section of the canyon, following what I think was Tanner Creek, we were out of water and dead tired. The creek was dry, just a bed of smooth stones and driftwood bleached white by the sun. We followed it toward the Colorado, hoping to camp by the water and cool off. We were stumbling more than walking at that point. I remember my head was pounding and my mouth was dry like sandpaper. My buddy was limping a little, and both of us were covered in red dust and sunburned. When we finally rounded the last set of boulders and saw the river, it felt like salvation. The water wasn't crystal clear, it was brown and fast and loud. But it was water, cold and moving. We dropped our packs and just stood there, trying to catch our breath. That's when we saw him. He was standing near where the creek met the river. At first, I thought he was a hallucination. That's how strange it felt. Just a guy standing alone, not moving, right on the edge of the water. He had long black hair and wore a denim shirt tucked into jeans. Looked like something out of a movie, like someone who didn't belong to this time. He wasn't doing anything at first, just standing there. We got a little closer and saw he had a racquetball in his hand. He threw it into the rapids right at the point where the river curved around a cluster of rocks. The ball shot downstream, skipped off a few rocks, then curved back, almost like it was on a string. It rolled to his feet. He picked it up, threw it again. Same thing, over and over, like he knew exactly how the water would move. It was weird, the kind of weird you don't realize is weird until later. We said hi as we walked past him. He didn't look at us at first, just gave a small wave, still watching the ball. After a few seconds, he said hi back, quietly. Then he turned and started walking downstream along the bank.
No backpack, no gear.
Just walked until we couldn't see him anymore. We didn't think much of it at the time. We were too tired to care. We found a flat spot upriver to set up camp. The sand was hot even in the evening. The river was roaring a few yards away. We took turns dunking ourselves in the water, trying not to get pulled by the current. Felt amazing, but we didn't relax. Not really. That night we couldn't sleep. The heat didn't let up much after dark. My shirt was soaked with sweat inside the tent. The ground was hard and uneven. Bugs crawled across my face more than once. Every little sound felt bigger in the dark. I kept thinking about that guy, about how calm he was, how perfectly that ball moved in the water, how he didn't have any gear, no water bottle,
No hut, no pack.
not even a place to sleep. It started to get to me. I whispered to my buddy at one point, asking if he thought that guy had hiked down the same trail we did. He just said, "I don't know, man. Go to sleep." But he was wide awake, too. I could hear him shifting around, breathing fast. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, we heard footsteps. Not animals, these were careful, measured steps on the rocks. We sat up, listening. Nothing for a long time. Then again, crunch, crunch. Not close, but not far either. We didn't have a fire going, didn't want to burn our limited fuel. Just lay there in the dark, clutching our knives like idiots. In the morning, there were no tracks around our camp. Not that we could find, but I swear I heard something out there. My buddy wouldn't talk about it. He just packed up quick and said he wanted to start the climb out before the sun got too high. We didn't eat, barely drank, just started hiking. The climb back up was brutal, way worse than coming down. Every step felt like it took 10 minutes. We had to stop constantly just to catch our breath. I started getting dizzy halfway up. My buddy almost passed out under one of the ledges. We ran out of water long before we made it back to the top. Had to ration the last sips between us. When we finally got back to the car, it was late afternoon. We sat in the shade of the trunk, not talking, just drinking warm water and staring out at the canyon. That's when it really hit us. That guy, that whole scene. It wasn't just weird, it didn't make sense. There's only one way down Tanner Trail, and no one passed us either way. It's a full-day hike in minimum, and we were the only car at the trailhead. We checked. No bikes, no camps, no footprints except ours. So how did he get down there? How did he know about that spot with the current? How was he dressed like he was going to a bar, not a multi-day canyon hike? We talked about it once a week later, sitting on his back porch, just trying to process the whole trip. I asked him what he thought the deal was with that guy. He didn't answer for a long time, then just said, "I don't think he hiked down. That was it." We never talked about it again, but I still think about it sometimes. About how some places are so big, so quiet, so far from anything normal that maybe things just don't work the same way down there. Maybe there are people or things that know those places in ways we never will. And maybe sometimes they're just standing at the edge of a river watching something roll back to them over and over like they've done it 1,000 times before. It happened in the summer of 2019 in the Adirondack Mountains near Warrensburg, New York. I've spent a lot of time in the woods over the years, and I've seen some strange things. Some of them explainable, most of them not. But what happened that night still sticks with me because it wasn't supernatural or over the top. It was real. It was the kind of thing that makes you rethink what you consider safe, even when you're with other people, even when you're in a camper. We were camping with my girlfriend's family, me, my girlfriend, her parents, and her younger sister. Her parents had just bought a new camper the year before. A nice one with a full kitchen, decent space, and bunks in the back. Her little sister took the top bunk, and I had the bottom. My girlfriend didn't want to leave her sister up there alone, so she brought some blankets and pillows and laid them down next to me on the bottom. It wasn't too cramped, and I actually liked the idea of being closer to the door, just in case. The site we were at was fairly quiet. Midweek, not a lot of people around. The area around us had a few other campers, maybe 4 or 5 spots occupied. One of them, just across from us, was an older couple who kept to themselves. I remember they had one of those small, older campers, nothing fancy, but they seemed like they'd been camping for decades. The other tents were scattered a bit down the road, separated by gravel driveways and patches of trees. The day had been uneventful. We hiked a bit, grilled some food, sat around the fire until it got dark. My girlfriend's parents turned in early, around 10 or so. Her sister was out cold not long after. My girlfriend and I stayed up a little later, just talking, scrolling through our phones, kind of winding down. It must have been around midnight when things started. I had my phone in my hand, scrolling through something mindless. Instagram, maybe. My girlfriend was next to me, curled up, half awake. The window next to my bunk was cracked open, just tilted enough to let in some of the night air. It was one of those long windows, darkly tinted, the kind that opens outward on a slant. From where I was laying, I couldn't really see out, just blackness. At first, it was subtle, gravel shifting, not like an animal running or a branch falling. This was slow, measured. I stopped scrolling and held my phone in place. The sound didn't stop. It was footsteps without a doubt. You could tell it was bipedal, 2 legs, not an animal. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The sound got closer, not rushed, careful, steady. It wasn't wind. It wasn't some raccoon. It was a person. I shut my phone off instantly. The sudden blackness of the screen made everything else feel darker. I laid still. I could hear each step, crunching slightly on the gravel that lined the edge of the camper. Whatever it was, whoever it was, stopped right next to my window. I couldn't see them. They couldn't see me, probably, but I'd had the phone on just a few seconds earlier. If they were watching, they might have seen the light, seen movement, known someone was in there, awake. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't make a sound. The footsteps didn't continue. Not for what felt like a solid 30 seconds. Then, finally, they started again, slowly moving away, heading toward the back of the camper. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. I reached over and quietly texted my girlfriend, telling her what I just heard. Her phone buzzed once. Then I saw her eyes go wide in the dark. She'd heard it too. Then, not even a minute later, there was more noise. This time not footsteps. Something was unzipping, not far, maybe 10 feet from the camper. There were 2 tents out there, just off to the side of our camper, sitting in the dirt where her parents had helped set them up for overflow storage. I heard the zipper clearly, then some rustling, like bags or clothes being moved around, maybe even shoes. It was deliberate, not frantic or panicked, controlled. At that point, my girlfriend nudged me and sat up. She quietly got out of the bunk and went to wake her parents. I stayed still, listening, my whole body tense. Her parents came out of the bed area and whispered with her. About 10 minutes later, they quietly opened the camper door and stepped outside with flashlights. I stayed inside, watching from one of the small windows. They walked around slowly, pointing their lights at the trees, at the tents under the camper. I watched them make a full circle. Then they came back inside. No one said anything too loudly, but from their body language and expressions, I could tell they didn't find anything. I barely slept that night. The next morning, the sunlight felt weird. Everything looked normal, calm. The tents, though, they were both unzipped. Not completely, just slightly, like someone had opened them and either didn't zip them back up or didn't care to. One of them had a corner of a duffel bag sticking out that hadn't been there before. Her parents had packed extra clothes, some tools, and other stuff in those tents. Nothing seemed obviously stolen, but none of us really knew what had been taken or moved. It just felt off. While we were drinking coffee and trying to laugh it off, the older couple across the way came over. They asked if we'd heard anything weird last night. Turns out, They'd heard it too. Gravel crunching around their site, something brushing lightly against the back of their camper. They said they didn't open their door, but sat up for nearly an hour after hearing it. They thought maybe it was an animal, but the man said it sounded too much like someone walking. There were no signs, no boot prints, no trash, nothing. Just those tents being slightly open. It wasn't a windy night. We hadn't heard any flapping or zippers moving on their own. It was done by someone. No one at any of the other nearby campsites reported anything. A couple of the sites had already cleared out that morning by the time we really started asking around. Her parents talked about it for a few hours. There was no police report, no big deal made about it. It was just written off as probably some drunk guy wandering through or maybe a lost hiker. But it didn't sit right with me. This wasn't someone stumbling around. It wasn't someone confused. It felt like whoever it was had purpose. They walked quietly, waited, watched. They opened the tents. They didn't touch the camper or try to open it, which made me think maybe they were looking for something easy, something left unattended. We finished the weekend, but none of us really relaxed after that. Every night after, her dad stayed up later, sitting by the fire even after everyone had gone to bed, flashlight in hand. Nothing else happened the rest of the trip. The next summer, when her parents talked about booking another trip to that area, they didn't. They chose a different region of the Adirondacks. Her dad just said something like, "Might as well try somewhere new." But I think it was more than that. I don't think they wanted to take the chance again. What gets me is how subtle it all was. No screams, no doors ripped open, no missing person report, just some quiet footsteps in the dark and a zipper pulling slowly open. And that's the kind of thing that stays with you. Not because it was dramatic, but because it could happen again, and you might never even know who or why. To this day, I still sleep with my phone within reach and the window closed, no matter how hot it gets.